Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Okay. Hopefully you're alive. All right. What are we talking about today?
George W. Bush
Okay.
fighting in Iraq.
All right. Panama, Iraq, George W. Bush. Were there any questions over the question? Okay. Go ahead and get ready. Put your notes up. All right. So, somebody help me out. Why did the U.S. fight in Iraq in 1991?
They,
Okay, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Now, why do I have to be so specific when I say why the U.S. fight in Iraq in 1991? Okay, because we have been fighting in Iraq 1991, 2003, 2007. So we have been fighting in Iraq for a long time. We want to be specific on what we're talking about, right? All right, so Saddam Hussein moves into Kuwait and we say, don't do that. So we go ahead and lead an international group to drive Iraq out of Kuwait. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. But the first one is Panama. Where's Panama and why is it important to the U.S.?
it's where the Panama Canal is.
Okay, it's where the Panama Canal is. We had lots of military personnel in Panama protecting the canal for decades, right? So all of a sudden we start having some issues, right? So let's go back to why we start having the issues. Panama, excuse me, the government of Panama was overthrown and a dictator came into power. He actually ran Panama for several years, and then amazingly enough, he was killed in a plane crash. Now, some people believe that the plane just crashed. Other people believe that the plane was helped to be crashed. If you believe the plane was helped to be crashed, the guy that you think helped crash the plane is Manuel Noriega. Manuel Noriega was a lieutenant colonel in the military. He was set up as the head of Panama's intelligence force group, and so he was tied very closely with the intelligence groups from other nations. When his boss died, he quickly got engaged and had himself declared the national leader. So once he declares himself the national leader, amazingly enough, he gets promoted immediately to general, because you need a rank if you're going to be running a government. But there are some pieces that are kind of interesting. So while he was running the intelligence agency, who do you think he would get close to? Are there any other intelligence agencies that might be interested in Panama's intelligence?
The KGB.
Okay, he actually was tied with the KGB. He was tied with Cuba. He was tied with the CIA. He was tied with several other intelligence agencies, right? The other thing he did is he got really well tied in with the drug dealers and the cartels down in South America. Why do you think he might get tied in with them?
Probably didn't have a choice, did he?
Money, yeah. I mean, he could have asked for U.S. support. He could have done, because he was very well tied in with everybody. But he was like, you know what? I'll make some money. So he would establish airports where the cartels could fly in, stop in Panama, get new fuel, get everything they needed, and then fly up to the U.S. and sell their drugs. So he's going to make lots of money doing that. The other thing, because he didn't have enough money and power, is he started being an agent for the CIA, telling them what everyone was doing in Panama. But this is where it gets interesting. He would actually tell them the opposing people who were not paying him money to push drugs through. He would tell the U.S. people where those people were, and then he would get paid by the cartels and the U.S. for telling on the other people, because the cartels were like, yeah, you're cutting out our competition. The U.S. was thinking that he was helping us reduce drug traffic. What he was intentionally doing is helping the drug traffickers that he liked. We start seeing some of this, but the other thing he does is the CIA will say, hey, these are the things we want you to look for against the communists. Now, again, he wants more money, right? So who could you sell that information to? The communists. So he actually is making money from CIA for giving them information on the communists. He's making money from the communists for telling them what CIA is looking for. He is making money from the US and the CIA about drug trafficking, but he's also making money from the drug traffickers. Do you see any problems with this?
You know what?
Probably getting a little power happy.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically working with enemies on both sides, right? So you know that can't work forever. And so the U.S. comes in and they indict him on drug charges in both Miami and Tampa, Florida. So they indict him. Can they arrest him? Yeah, it's really hard because he is in a different country and he is the leader of that country. So they just bring charges against him and they're like, when we are able to, we will go ahead and do the trials. So he gets frustrated with the U.S. He says, you can't do this to me. And he winds up declaring war on the U.S. Now, I just want to ask, what are the chances of Panama actually invading the U.S. and doing any damage? None. I mean, you could send the entire Panamanian army here. First off, we had about 20,000 military personnel in Panama, so we're already there. They would just have to defend themselves. But to try to send a Panamanian army into the U.S., they would not get anywhere. So if you're the president of the U.S., which George Bush is the president of the U.S. at the time, George H.W., he's like, whatever. Is it really a threat? Is it really, I mean, he can just be like, okay, I don't care. Declare war all you want, right? Now, what would change that?
They actually acted on it.
Okay, if the Panamanians actually started to attack U.S. citizens, and guess what they do? They kill a Marine, yes. So they wind up putting roadblocks up to stop U.S. personnel and harass them. At one point, there is some U.S. Marines who are going into Panama City. They're going to go to a restaurant. They are not in uniform. They are just going in for a dinner. And as they are driving, the Panamanians stop them and they tell them, get out of the vehicle. The Marines first say, hey, you have no authority to tell us to get out of the vehicle. You can stop us, you can ask us what's in the vehicle, but you don't have the authority to tell us get out. And they were concerned that the Panamanians were acting really aggressively, and so they refused to get out. At one point, when the Panamanians pull a gun, they go ahead and shoot the Jeep on and just drive off. Panamanians shoot at them, they kill one of the Marines, and they injured one of the Marines. At the same time, they had pulled a naval officer and his wife out, and they beat them pretty badly. And so at that point, George Bush says, wait a minute. So you declared war against us, but now you have killed a U.S. Marine, you have beaten a Navy officer, and you have injured a U.S. Marine. So George Bush now says, all right, you have declared war, we will go ahead and fight the war. So on December 17th, Bush authorizes the overthrow of Noriega. You already have 12,000 military personnel sitting in Panama. Why does he not just use those personnel? The guys down there have a very different mission. They are logistics. They are trying to make sure things are settled. They are military police. They are not actual war fighters as such. And so he goes ahead and sends 9,000 Rangers down on the 20th to join all of the 12,000 people down there. So now, if you want to grab a group of people who are going to fight, the Rangers are the right guys, right? These are the step one toward the special forces. And so they go down there. When they go down, they fight the Panamanian Defense Forces. The Panamanian Defense Forces fight very hard, but they are pretty quickly overthrown, overwhelmed. And so 4 days later, the Rangers have crushed the PDF. Guillermo Endara is made the president, and he immediately disbands the Panamanian Defense Forces. Therefore, the U.S. now is guiding and guarding Panama, right? All right, so what's the other thing that is left to do? We have overthrown the Panamanian Defense Forces. We have placed a guy into position of leadership. We have allowed their government to move on. There's one thing left to do. Who declared war on the U.S.?
Panama.
Who?
Oh, the
Noriega.
Noriega.
So what happened to Noriega?
Indicted.
He has been indicted. Have we arrested him?
No.
No. And so Noriega, it's kind of interesting. Noriega, we knew where he was supposed to be. We went and we tried to grab him there. What we didn't know is that that night he had decided to visit a prostitute. So when the Rangers came in, he was no longer at his house. He was on the way to the prostitute. He decided, he saw everybody rolling in, and he was like, okay, I don't think I'll go there. And he hid out. Now, he was in hiding for a while. We tried to find him. And while we were looking for him, he decided that he was a Catholic. Now, realistically, based on his support for drugs and prostitution and all this other stuff, I would say he's probably not the best Catholic. Is that a reasonable assumption? All right. But he claims, I am Catholic, therefore I need to be able to go into the papal embassy. Now, it's not declared an embassy, but it's where they have their resources. If you are the Pope, if you are Catholic, do you have to let him in? They believe that they did. He has declared that he needs sanctuary, so they allow him in. Now, they talk to the U.S. and they say, okay, he's here. So the U.S. can go in and grab him, right? No, why not?
Because they're not Catholic and claim to need sanctuary.
Okay, because the U.S., if the U.S. goes in there and grabs him, this is this area is owned by the Catholic Church, right? So
Their country.
yes, so we would be invading the Catholic Church's land.
Yes.
Is that going to go over well? No, it's illegal, and it would go very, very badly with loads of U.S. voters. And so if you can't go in and take him out, what's the next best thing?
Wait for him to leave.
Okay, you surround the place and you wait for him. The papal nuntiate, who is the representative of the Pope, says, look, I don't want him here. I'm not super happy with him here. you guys can't come in and get him, but we will do our best to convince him to leave. And so there is a waiting period where we're trying to get him to come out. Loads of news media start to surround the area, and the general in charge says, this is going to be a problem because we don't want the media getting involved in the negotiations. So he says, you know what we need to do is have some music, have some kind of noise to prevent people from hearing conversations either in the nunciate or outside. So he says, give me some music. The U.S. military is more than happy to help. They go ahead and bring in a radio station, speakers, all sorts of stuff. And I wasn't able to put it on this slide, but this is thought this was going to work smoothly. All right. Try it again. All right. Can you guys read these? They're pretty small. What do you see as the trend?
This is music.
It is music. It is all different songs by bands.
They're all like rock music. They're mocking him.
Yes, they're all like strong rock to heavy metal, and most of them are really obnoxious. Like they intentionally, Danger Zone, Guilty, Don't Fear the Reaper, If I Had a Rocket Launcher, Judgment Day, Long Arm of the Law. They did throw the Star Spangled Banner in there by Jimi Hendrix.
There we go. That one's funny.
Yeah, Wanted Man, You Hurt Me and I Hate You, Your Time Is Gonna Come. Now, I did appreciate they put in Panama by Van Halen. But a lot of the guys just were like, you know what, let's throw in something that's really obnoxious. And they jacked up the speakers super, super high. And the papal representatives actually complained that they were torturing people because 24-hour heavy metal rock music is playing, and they're like, can you please tell them stop? So the U.S. actually told them, all right, let's relax a little bit, let's stop this, there's no reason to be obnoxious. So they went ahead and they reduced the music. They just played it as, all right, we're going to have music in the background, but it's not going to be super loud. So how did we finally get Noriega out? The senior priest in the area went in and actually took Noriega in to get communion. And while they were taking communion, he basically made him feel guilty and said, look at all the stuff you've done. If you really want to take communion, if you really want to go to heaven, then you need to go take responsibility for your crimes. And so he convinced Noriega to give himself up. Can the military arrest Noriega? No, the military has no authority. So they actually brought in federal agents from narcotics, and they arrested him and took him back to the U.S. He was tried for numerous crimes in the U.S. He was convicted of the crimes, but he did not serve out his time. Any thoughts on why he might not have served out his time?
Plea bargain.
Actually, there are other countries that want him, right? So we sent him to France. He is convicted there. And then we talked to France and was like, hey, actually the Panamanians want him. Now, what would the Panamanians want him for? He was one of the most feared people in Panama. He'd killed hundreds of people. So they brought him back on charges of murder and extortion and all other stuff. So he is convicted in Panama. He actually winds up dying. If I remember right, he dies in a hospital because he spends so much time in prison that he gets old and he has dementia and doesn't even remember, who he is or what's going on. So they take him to a hospital and he dies there. But after this point, we're like, okay, now we have Panama back under good authority, so we are ready to move on. All right. Second thing happens under the Bush administration is the invasion of Kuwait. So from 1980 to 1988, Iran and Iraq are fighting. Anybody know what this is about? It's called the Tanker War. And so Iran, we'll go back thousands of years. Is Iran Arab? No, it is not. Iran is Persian. So Iraq is Arabic, Iran is Persian. And so when you look at this back centuries ago, probably millennia ago, you had the Persian Empire, you had the Babylonian Empire, and these two groups clashed, right? These are the same people that are living in the same places later. So you already have kind of this historical background of we don't like you. Then into the mix comes Islam. So Muhammad starts Islam. When Muhammad dies, they try to figure out who is going to replace Muhammad. So Muhammad's father-in-law, Abu Bakr, is the guy that the Sunnis decide, hey, this guy should be leading Islam. But the Sunnis say, no, you can only have a blood relative. So they select another person. And so now you have Sunnis and Shias. They believe that the other group is wrong. They believe that the other group is messing up Islam. And so they are fighting. So not only do you have the historical empire background, you now have religious background tied into it. And then Iraq and Iran, as they develop, also are competing for oil, for power, for influence in the area. And so Iraq tends to support Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, all these other places that are Arab, right? And so they say, hey, we're going to protect you against the Shia, against the Persians. And so at one point in 1980, Saddam Hussein decides to start a war with Iran. And as they fight back and forth, it impacts the price of oil, it impacts the safety of that area. And so lots of other countries get involved. But at the end of the day, it costs a lot of money and it costs both sides a lot of people. By the end, Iran is just doing human waves of people into Iraqi army. And so both countries are devastated by the conflict. Now, once the conflict is over, Saddam Hussein turns to the other Arab nations and he says, all right, I fought this war for you guys. So you guys have to help pay the costs of the war. Now, if you're Saudi Arabia, if you're Qatar, if you are UAE, Bahrain, do you think you need to owe any money for this? Did you declare the war? Did you cause the war? No. They're like, no, we're not helping you pay for it. So Saddam Hussein says, okay, well, if you won't help pay for it, then what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the flow of oil so the oil prices will rise, and then I will make the money back with oil. Right? Again, what do you think Saudi and Kuwait and the other nations do?
Get angry.
They're like, we're not going to reduce the price or the sale of oil. We're going to make money. We don't need to worry about what you have to say. So Saddam Hussein gets really, really angry, and he's like, I did this for you guys. Now you guys owe me. And so he demands that, he's like, we're gonna make this work. The next thing that happens is you have an oil deposit, right? In the oil deposit, this side belongs to Kuwait, and this side belongs to Iraq. Does that make sense? All right. When they are pumping oil, Kuwait pumps oil, and we'll say the oil is up to here, right? When Kuwait pumps the oil, as they pump the oil, it goes down on the Kuwaiti side, but it doesn't mess with the Iraqi side, right? Yeah, it's a look you should have.
I was like, I'm confused.
Does oil recognize national boundaries? No. Oil does not recognize national boundaries. So as you pump from the Kuwaiti side, you're also pumping from the Iraqi side, right? How do you think Saddam Hussein is going to feel about this? Yeah, he's really angry, and he says, you're stealing Iraqi oil. Is Kuwait stealing Iraqi oil? I mean, they are pulling from their side. It is what it is, right? So he is really furious. The other thing is he believes that there is some of the slant well stuff going on, and they are coming into the Iraqi side. Long story short, he claims that Kuwait is stealing his oil. They are not paying their debts. And he gets really angry and says, you know what? Back when we were part of the British Empire, they made a mistake. Kuwait should be part of Iraq. So this is Kuwait. This is Iraq. He says, you know what? They should not have put this national border here. They should have just declared Kuwait to be the 19th province of Iraq. So how does Kuwait feel about this?
You don't like it at all.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, we are our own country. The U.S. and the UN both roll in, and they're like, hey, you just need to slow down a little bit. Just relax, calm down. Nobody needs to have problems, right? We can work this out. We'll sit down, we'll get everybody together, and we will figure out who owns what oil, and everything can be fine. So, how does Saddam Hussein feel about this? Yeah, he's not going to negotiate. So, on August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein sends in 100,000 troops into Kuwait. Iraq at this point has the 4th largest army in the world. Anybody want to guess what size Kuwait's army is?
Probably very small, but small.
Yeah, it's 20,000. So think about, you just sent, this is like the US versus Panama, right? You just sent 100,000 soldiers into a country that has a 20,000 person military. Who's going to win?
Obviously.
Yeah, the invaders, obviously, right? Because at the end of the day, they've got 5-to-1 ratio. And they are well trained, they are very capable. And so the Kuwaiti army fights long enough for the royal family and some of the key people to get out of Kuwait. And then they collapse, and some of the army actually goes into Saudi Arabia with the Kuwaiti royal family. Now, does this mean that they're a bunch of cowards? No. I mean, they're going to go in with the royal family, and so they are protecting the royal family, but realistically, they are not going to win this war anyway, right? So now you have Iraq controlling Kuwait, right? They formally annex it 6 days later, and they presume that the world is just going to kind of go away. Does the world go away? No. This point, everybody condemns them. We put sanctions on them. We say, you can't do this. Do the sanctions work? Do they decide to leave? No. So, in fact, once we start to put sanctions on, Iraq says, all right, I'm going to do something that will convince you to leave us alone. There's a whole lot of Western people who are oil businessmen in Kuwait, right? So he has his army go and kidnap all of these oil workers and the oil leaders. And he thinks that if he kidnaps the US citizens and British citizens and other people, that everybody will back off and just let him do what he wants. Now, what happens when he kidnaps all these people?
They retaliate.
Okay, now all the world is like, okay, not only did you tick us off with Kuwait, but now you kidnapped our own people. Now we're really ticked off. Let those people go. Now you're just a bad, horrible person, and we are going to make sure that you release Kuwait. So the US and the UN condemn it. Again, Saudi Arabia is really concerned they're going to be attacked next. Is that a reasonable fear? All right. Why did he attack Kuwait? Because they wouldn't pay for the army, the fight against Iran, and because they continue to sell oil. Did Saudi Arabia support, give them money for the war? No. And did they continue selling oil? Yes. So it's a real threat. They're like, he invaded Kuwait based on the same things that we have done. So he has the capability to invade Saudi Arabia. And if he invades Saudi Arabia, we do not have any power to protect ourselves. So if you are Saudi Arabia, who do you think you might go to for help?
Yes.
The US. So there's a discussion between Dick Cheney, who was the Secretary of Defense, and the Saudi Arabia king. And they talk about, hey, would the US be willing to protect Saudi Arabia? And Cheney says, yes, we will help you guys out. What we want to do is make sure that our oil is protected and that the stability of the nations is protected. Now, when you look at it, why would the US care about the oil?
We need it.
Okay, so between Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, they control like 40% of the world's oil. And so if Saddam Hussein gains control of that much oil, then he could shut down the US, he could shut down the world, right? So now the US pushes another embargo on Iraq, and August 2nd, Bush orders troops into Saudi Arabia. Now, the first guys who go in are pretty small, right? Are they going to be able to stop Iraq from attacking? No. Why would Bush throw in military personnel that he knows aren't going to be able to stop the fight? The first thing he's trying to do is convince Iraq not to invade. If you throw U.S. personnel in, even if they can't stop Iraq, what will they do? Say it again. Okay, so they're going to slow down any attack, right? And if you are planning on invading Saudi Arabia and there's U.S. troops, what do you know is going to happen if you attack the U.S. troops?
US is gonna.
Yeah, the U.S. is going to join the war. Until the U.S. is there, he can invade Saudi and, who knows? The U.S. might care, the U.S. might not. But as soon as U.S. troops are there, if you go in and you kill a U.S. person, what happens in Panama? Hey, we declared war, but no one cares. You kill the U.S. Marine, okay, now it's on, right? And so now you have just enough troops that the U.S. can say, hey, we're going to be there, we're going to protect them. And so we continue to put troops in. Bush goes around the world and he says, look, we need to support the UN, we need to support Kuwait. Let's go ahead and build a coalition force that will protect Saudi Arabia and be able to help drive Iraq out if needed. So pretty soon they have 750,000 coalition forces. 540,000 of those are U.S. military. On November 29th, the UN tells Iraq that the world is authorized to use any means necessary to free Kuwait. Why do I say they tell Iraq that?
Because they're the ones in Kuwait.
Okay. Because, yeah, they're telling everybody, but their point is to ensure Iraq knows, look, we are making this a huge issue and we are going to attack you. It's going to be the world against Iraq. And so we are going to push this. I did not talk before about I just lost it. Colin Powell, the Powell Doctrine. But we'll get to that in a minute. So once the UN says authorize all means necessary, they set a deadline and they say, Iraq, you have to be out of Kuwait by January 16th. George Bush gets on TV and he says, Iraq, I just want you to know you have to be out by January 16th or the U.S. will invade. He says this in English. Why does he throw it in English? I mean, wouldn't it be better to put it in Arabic for the Iraqis?
He's trying to look tough for the American people.
Okay. He wants the American people to know and the American people to support it. When he gives this presentation, when he talks to the American people, he says, hey, I want you to know that there is a dictator who is going in and taking over other countries. And he makes an explicit comparison to Hitler. Why would he make a comparison to Hitler? Okay, because everyone hates the Nazis. Everyone's like, oh, if this guy's like Hitler, then we have to get him out, right? Because he might go into Kuwait today, he might go into UAE tomorrow, he might go into Saudi the next day. We have to stop this immediately. And so he goes ahead and he says, you have to get out. So how does Saddam Hussein respond?
He doesn't really.
Yeah, he puts 300,000 more troops into Kuwait. Is that a good way to show that your good faith effort trying to pull out? No, that's all right, let's go. I don't think you guys are serious. I don't think that you guys are going to do this. The other thing is Saddam Hussein has been in power in Iraq because he is a strong man. His intent is to rule by fear, right? So everyone in Iraq is scared of him. If he backs up, if he backs out because of a U.S. threat, what does that make him look like? Makes him look weak. And he can't afford to look weak because somebody will attack him. So he's like, nope, I'm going to add more people and I'm just going to fight harder. All right. So the U.S. continues to build forces, build forces, build forces. It's kind of funny, the news actually goes in and they have people in Baghdad and they are watching and they're like, okay, what's going on? And you see the news media reporting on January 16th. And it's like, well, is anything happening? Nope, nothing happening. We go ahead and attack in nighttime in Baghdad. Why do you think we would attack nighttime in Baghdad?
Visibility.
Okay, so we have the ability to do night attacks. The other thing is, what time is it in the U.S.? Yeah, it's right when the news comes on. And we want to make the point, hey, we are doing this. This is for the U.S. to kind of see. But yes, they go in and they have the shock and awe. When they attack with aircraft first. There are no ground troops. Why do you think we would not send ground troops first?
Because isn't it like nothing but desert?
Yeah, I mean it's straight desert for most of Iraq. And they have the fourth largest army in the world, right? Do you want to just attack into the fourth largest army into the world? No. So the other thing we knew about the Iraqi army is they are very, like, you will take orders. It's very top heavy. And so the Iraqi army is not able to make any decisions without Saddam Hussein helping determine what they're going to do, which is much like what we have seen in other countries. In the U.S., if a colonel loses contact with a general, what are they going to do? They just take over and they say, all right, I've lost contact. I know what the general's last guidance was, and I'm going to go based on that guidance. So if a army major loses contact with a colonel, what are they going to do?
Go to the general?
Well, if they lose, if everybody above them is gone, what do?
Take over?
They take over and they run, right? This is how we're going to do things. This is the latest guidance I have. This is how we're going to do it. So, goes all the way down, right? If you are the senior person that you can contact, you just go in and you take care of things. In the Iraqi army, it's just the opposite. If you lose contact with the leadership, you sit there because you don't want to mess up. You don't want to try to move forward and get in trouble for moving forward. So we decide what we want to do is take out all the communication systems, all of the command and control systems between the leadership and the people out in the field. If you do that, what does that do to the Iraqi army? Yeah, now they don't have guidance, so they just kind of sit there. I remember we had some real problems because this is when you had the first really, really accurate bombs. And so we actually bombed the command and control area. The command and control area is in the basement of the building, and there were other buildings that we didn't want to hit. So when the bomb went in, it destroyed the basement area of the building, but outside all we could see is a little hole where it went in. And so the general came in, he was like, did we take out their command and control? And we said, sir, we know that the bomb hit, we know that the bomb went into the basement, and we don't hear anything from the command and control anymore, so we think we got it. He's like, no, I want to know, did we take it out? It was super hard for intel because we could not tell what had been destroyed, what had not been destroyed. In the past, when you have buildings that are laying in rubble, you're like, yeah, it's gone. When the outside of the building actually stays firm, but you've destroyed everything, it's really hard to know, did you take it out or not? But we did. So we destroyed their command and control. Then we go and destroy their air defense system. Why would we take out their air defense system?
They're strictly on ground warfare.
Because then they can't direct all of their air defense systems. We control the air. The next thing we do is start shooting down their planes. And it's really funny to me, Iraqi pilots, there was a few Iraqi pilots that did make it off the ground into the air, and they immediately flew to Iran. Why would they fly to Iran? They just finished an 8-year war against Iran.
To finish their job.
Okay, because that's the only place that they could go that they thought was safe. If they start flying towards Saudi Arabia, what's going to happen? Yeah, we're going to shoot them down because we think they're a threat. If they start flying toward Kuwait, toward Qatar, any of the other nations, Bahrain, what are we going to do? We're going to shut them down. We're going to shoot them down because they're a threat. So the only place that they felt like they could fly was into Iran, and they fly into Iran and they're like, hey, we just want to give up. We're not part of the fight anymore. So now we control the air. This is the initial plan. So we control the air. We have taken out all of their command and control. Their military units are waiting for the invasion, but for weeks we don't invade. What we do is we just fly over and bomb the snot out of their military formations. So I remember hearing one of the Iraqi tanker guys say how at one point the safest place to stay at night was you slept inside your tank because you knew that nobody could harm you. And he said once the U.S. had gained air superiority, they all slept at least 90 yards away from their tank because the tank was the most dangerous place to sleep. You had U.S. planes that would fly over and just blow up tank after tank after tank because we could. So now you have the U.S. military in complete control. The Iraqi military is not able to do much. So now on February 24th, which is a little over a month in, the U.S. rolls in. We had Marines sitting in the Persian Gulf, and everyone thought that they were going to come in, and they thought that you would bring in U.S. troops in this way. But the big group of forces actually came out here and rolled into Iraq and drove the Iraqis toward Kuwait. Why do you think that we would do that? Seems kind of the opposite of what we're wanting, right?
We're gonna
I mean, it cuts them off from like, if you keep pushing them to somewhere smaller, it's gonna cut them off from bigger resources that they can get.
Okay, so the first thing, yes, is if you come here and you're pushing them this way, they don't have access to any of the food or military supplies from this area. The other thing is if we had come up and driven them out of Kuwait, most of them would have survived the fight, and as soon as we drove them back into Iraq, the war is over, right? Because all our goal is to drive them out. Now, if we do that and they are sitting out here with a bunch of tanks, as soon as we leave, what could they do again? they could just go straight back in. So we said, nope, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we are going to drive them into Kuwait. So we had people in Kuwait, but our major folks were killing them and destroying their military forces on the way into Kuwait, so that when we left, they would not have the ability to go back and fight Kuwait again. So we overwhelmed, we completely decimated their forces. This is one of the most effective conflicts that the U.S. has fought since World War II. And again, we didn't know if this was going to work because realistically, they are the 4th largest army in the world. They were up to date, but works really, really well. So February 28th, Bush declares a ceasefire. The entire combat lasted only 42 days. Kuwait is now liberated, but we didn't take Saddam out of power. Why would we not take Saddam out of power? A lot of people call it a failure. So, anybody know what Iraq is like in terms of people? It is a bunch of people. All right, so this is not a perfect map, but this area up here is controlled by the Kurds. This area here is controlled by the Shiites. The center area is controlled by the Sunnis. So, if you take out Saddam Hussein controls all of these people, right? If you take out Saddam Hussein, what happens to Iraq? Civil war. And that is exactly what we see after 2003, right? So you have the Kurds who say, we don't want to be part of this. You have the Shiites who say, we don't want to be part of this. And so Saddam Hussein is the one thing that keeps Iraq together. So is Saddam Hussein a good guy? No, he's a dirtbag. He is evil.
What's the difference between all of those, I guess?
Okay, I'm sorry. So the Shiites and the Sunni are both Arabs for the most part. But the Shiites believe that Muhammad's successor has to be a family member. And the Sunnis believe that the best, most capable person will take over and be the leader of the Muslims. So the Sunnis are more like the Catholics. There is no such thing. It would be like saying that for a Christian, Jesus Christ, son, has to take over, right? Or a brother or a nephew or something like that. It has to be a blood relative. And so these two don't get along because of religious. The Kurds, actually, there's a huge Kurdish group. They are in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria. And after World War I, we started to create a Kurdistan. And then the Turks basically said, if you create a Kurdistan, we will commit genocide and kill them all. And so we were like, okay, we won't do a Kurdistan. And so you have these groups of Kurds, and it's a different ethnic group than the Arabs. And so they don't like the Arabs don't like them. And everybody's like, oh, we just really don't like each other. Is that enough? I mean, basically it's just groups of people that don't like each other. And what makes it worse is because the Sunnis have controlled both of these groups, they have treated them very badly. And so now these groups are like, well, we want to treat you badly. So that's the problem that you have is if we take out Saddam Hussein, then Iraq turns into a nightmare. And so we choose not to do that. All right, so I talked briefly about the Powell Doctrine. The Powell Doctrine is a methodology that is supposed to determine if the U.S. gets involved in a war or not. I think it's a brilliant work. The Colin Powell started out as a lieutenant in Vietnam. He went back as a major. He saw that we got into Vietnam. No one understood why we were there. No one knew what the goals were. No one knew how to win. And he's like, okay, we should never, ever do this again. So he got together and the Secretary of Defense at the time, and he kind of put some thoughts together. But they came out with several questions. So is a vital national security interest threatened? Now, when you say that, is there one threatened with Kuwait being attacked by Iraq? Okay, I got a yes. What is it? Oil. And so we said, yes, this is true. Do we have a clear, attainable objective? Yes. What is it? We need Iraq out of Kuwait. That is our objective. We don't need any other objectives. Have the risk and cost been fully and frankly analyzed? Iraq was the 4th largest army, but we're like, you know what? We still think we can pull this off. Have all other nonviolent policy means been exhausted? Yes, the UN has gone in and said, get out. We put sanctions on them. We put troops into Saudi Arabia. We're like, okay, nothing is working. We'll go ahead and go. Is there a plausible exit strategy to avoid endless entanglement? This is where they decide we're not going to take Saddam Hussein out, because if you take him out, then you could be stuck there in a civil war forever. Have the consequences been fully considered? They determined yes. Is the action supported by the American people? Again, this is where George Bush gets on the TV and says, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. We believe that we can do this, and we believe it's the right thing to do. And so, yes, the American people support it. And then finally, do we have genuine, broad international support? Now, realistically, for Desert Storm, did we have international support? Yes. So, if you are going by the Powell Doctrine, is it a good decision to go into Iraq in 1991? Yes. And are we successful? Yes. It is probably the most successful post-Vietnam conflict that the U.S. has been involved in. All right. So now George Bush is a war hero. He defeated the 4th most powerful nation in the world in a month and a half, right? So he is coming up for election. Is he going to be reelected? Doesn't it make sense that he's like a shoo-in? All right. The problem is, before the war, he says, or as he is rolling into the election cycle, he says, I promise you no more taxes, no new taxes. And someone's like, well, are you sure? And he goes, read my lips, no new taxes. But fighting a war costs a lot of money. All the borrowing that Reagan did cost a lot of money. And so he says, you know what? We really do need to raise taxes. We don't want to get into inflation. We don't want to get into stagflation. So we're going to raise taxes. And this ticks a lot of people off. All right. The other thing, and I'm going to dive down here first, there's a Texas billionaire named Ross Perot that gets into the mix, and he is more conservative. His goal, he says, we need to pay off the debt. We need to have the U.S. use a good budget. And he actually pushes for no pass, no play. So I think I have several athletes in this room. What is no pass, no play?
They cannot pass into the classroom.
Yes. Prior to this, you could, if you were a really good football player, in fact, I had a guy in our high school that was amazing. Went to a Division I football team and immediately failed out because he had been just pushed through. And Ross Perot said, you know what? No, you're in school for an education. You're not in school to go to the NFL. So he came out with no pass, no play. If you don't pass your classes, you don't play, which hopefully motivates people to work on their schoolwork and not just focus on athletics or other things. All right, so you have George H.W. Bush, you have Ross Perot. Who's the last guy? Bill Clinton. What do you know about Bill Clinton?
He's from Arkansas.
Okay, he is the governor of Arkansas. He is kind of laid back, cool guy. You know, hey, how are things going?
I think they're known for a scandal.
He's kind of a ladies' man. He, you know, there's.
Democratic.
Yes, he is the Democratic nominee. He got on late night television, which is not as big a deal anymore, and he played his saxophone, I think. I'm embarrassed because I don't remember which instrument, but it was like, oh, that guy is super cool. You know, I would date him, right? And so there are some concerns that people are like, he has a reputation for trying to pick up women. In fact, there are a couple women who are suing him because he did inappropriate things as the governor of Arkansas. But at the end of the day, the news media is like, hey, you know, it's not that big a deal. He didn't do that much, and we're not certain exactly what happened. They might be making it up. So at the end of the day, Clinton wins 43% of the popular vote. Perot takes 18.9%, which most of that comes from H.W. Bush. And so Bush winds up with 37% of the vote. This now means Clinton is our new president. So George Bush was able to do a lot in terms of foreign policy. This is probably his forte. And Clinton rolls in. Clinton is not as strong in foreign policy, but we will talk about his administration next class period. All right. So, why does the U.S. fight in Iraq in 1991? Say it again.
The invasion of Kuwait
All right. Iraq invades Kuwait. Why does the U.S. care?
because of
Because of oil, and because we're like, no, you have to protect the stability of the national, international borders. All right, so I didn't actually address this. So did it talk in the book about the shutdown? All right,
The government shutdown?
yeah,
I did briefly.
okay. So what happens with the government shutdown?
Nothing happens in that time frame. Just
All right, so Bush basically says, look, we're going to reduce the budget. We're not going to, we're going to have the taxes. Congress refuses to allow him. He says, I'm not going to sign a budget that is too high. And Congress says, well, we really don't care. And so it actually shuts down the U.S. government, which I think is kind of funny because it only shuts down the unimportant parts. I was U.S. military, and they're like, yeah, you're not getting shut down. You're still going to work. Shut up. So we just didn't get paid. So we worked, but we didn't get paid. And then when the government came back up, they're like, okay, you're going to get paid for the time that you were working. But this is what cost Bush his second term in office is because he's like, no, we're going to raise taxes, we're going to balance the budget, and not everybody agreed. All right, so we are going to be looking into President Clinton. President Clinton starts out far to the left. A couple of years in, he decides, wait a minute, everybody voted for the Republicans, so people are not happy with me, and so he moves more to be a centrist. And then we will talk about his impeachment. So, all right. We are getting close to the end. I talked to somebody and I was going to try to have questions ready for the midterm, or I'm sorry, for the final exam out to you. I will do my best to see if I can get those out tonight and let you guys know what's going to happen. For the people that asked for your paper, I will go ahead and get that back to you. If there's any other questions, make sure you let me know and we will talk through it. How far are we from the end of the class? Anybody know?
We have 3 or 4 quizzes.
Yeah, there is, I think, so there is Wednesday and then next Tuesday, and then after Thanksgiving break, I think you have 1 week. So, all right. If you guys have no more questions, I guess I will talk to you later.